This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 150. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Strozinski. On today's episode, this former WWE star is working without an AEW contract, as well as who would introduce Rob Van Dam if by chance he ever gets welcomed into the WWE Hall of Fame, and what's going on with Roman Reigns and CM Punk. We've got the lowdown. We're going to give you all of that. Of course, we're going to take a look at the biggest topics and trends in wrestling, and of course, because it was the weekend of another pay-per-view, it seems like every time we do one of these shows, we are reviewing or previewing a pay-per-view. We have to review what I think was probably a pretty good Clash of Champions. And doing it with me, as always, he is the leader of our predictions results, because there's not a show that goes by where he doesn't at least irk out some kind of point. He is the one. He is the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
It's all good, baby. Yes, I thought that Clash of Champions was enjoyable, and typically I think that it's kind of a show that's starting to eke its way into the mix there, maybe even top five. You know, after the big four, Clash of Champions is always good because it settles some scores. You get to see who gets elevated, and you get to see, I think, the wrestlers really kind of respect a brand and a name, because, you know, Clash of Champions goes back to the old WCW days, and it was always a show that Ric Flair, Sting, Vader, you'd have like these memorable moments on Clash of Champions. So, you know, even though it's in a COVID era, I thought the show flowed well. A lot of the results I liked, and I just thought it was a show that was really enjoyable. And the good thing is I got a lot of the predictions right, so that always makes it fun. You're like, okay, this is good, but a lot came away from it. I thought it was a really all-around, well-written show, and not too much that you could say, oh my God, I can't believe this happened.
Yeah, I thought it was a good show. Like you said, it helped settle some scores. I thought what we got in the ring was pretty solid. A lot of times what will happen is we'll have these pay-per-views, and they come off of back-to-back-to-back pay-per-views, and the in-ring work just isn't there. This wasn't one of those pay-per-views. This started off with the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match between Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura, defeating Lucha House Party by pinfall. Thought it was a good match. This quickly transitioned into the Intercontinental Championship triple threat match. And this was a ladder match. And we both thought that Jeff Hardy was going to come away the victor here, because this is, after all, Jeff Hardy's match. But Sami Zayn ends up getting the championship after beating Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles to now become the undisputed Intercontinental Champion. How surprised were you by this result?
Sami Zayn, when I think about it now, based on what we talked about, definitely a character that needs to be invested in. And Jeff Hardy, I think, you know, at this point in his career, can be used to move others along in their career. So Sami Zayn, definitely deserving of it, and it was a moment. So I am all aboard Sami Zayn having it. I think that the match lived up to the hype. It was a lot of great spots, and then who doesn't love seeing Jeff Hardy recreate those crazy wild spots in the ladder match? So kudos to them. I would argue one of the matches of the night.
Yeah, all in all, I think it was a fantastic match. And Sami Zayn getting the title, I think it speaks to this overarching storyline that they're kind of working with. It was a situation where Vince forced Sami Zayn to give up the title and pulled it from him, and now they can kind of work it into what's actually going on. Now, this was a weird pay-per-view because a lot of the women for this pay-per-view were not medically cleared to participate due to COVID-19. So because of that, you end up with a little bit of filler, and that filler comes in these next two matches. So you have Drew Gulak pinning R-Truth backstage to win the 24/7 championship. Now, later on in the show, R-Truth ends up getting his belt back to become the 476th champion of the 24/7 championship. Now, we had the Raw Women's Championship. Asuka ends up defeating Zelina Vega by submission. And later on in the night, Asuka comes back out to fight Bayley for the SmackDown Women's Championship because Nikki Cross wasn't medically cleared. And this ends up in a disqualification. Sasha ends up coming down, beating up Bayley. I think this is great storytelling. We kind of talked about it a little bit on last week's episode and how this match might play out. And I think this kind of worked out true to form. Now, you didn't have Nikki Cross, but what you had was you had Sasha come down and really deliver an ass whip into Bayley, which then helps set up what's going to take place at Hell in the Cell. And by all accounts, Bayley and Sasha will be main eventing Hell in the Cell. And I think that might be the perfect ending to this story, because this has been going on for quite some time. It feels like it's been going on for almost a year now. And I think this is going to be the culmination of some great storytelling.
Absolutely. I think that you definitely kick off a nice, healthy feud, and you get Sasha in there. And obviously, Bayley, being the heel character, I think has really morphed into somebody that the company can trust to do that role. It really did stink for me that, some of these women, like, I was excited to see that tag team match. I was excited to see Nikki Cross just because we had so much riding on it, but it didn't happen. And look, in this day and age of COVID, you got to expect that cards are always going to be subject to change, and you just got to see what they do. And obviously, in this situation, they made up for it flawlessly, because probably in the end, this is how it should have been told anyway.
Absolutely. And then you had your United States Championship match. Bobby Lashley retains his belt by defeating Apollo Crews by submission. You had the Raw Tag Team Championship match. Street Profits end up defeating Angel Garza and Andrade by pinfall. We end up having our double main event, which was the WWE Championship. It was an ambulance match between Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. What were your overall thoughts on this match?
I just felt like, again, my biggest notes that I put down were Drew McIntyre has continued to elevate his brand. Randy Orton can have different kind of matches with different wrestlers. And it's just one of those things where I'm ready for this feud to end. But if they keep throwing different type of matches, these two can work together. They're really intense. It's believable. It's an entertaining match to watch. Drew McIntyre has been elevated by this feud, so kudos to Randy Orton for doing the jobs over and over. And it kind of is one of those situations where Randy doesn't need to win, but his losses are in no way diminishing what this guy is all about. Randy Orton's a legend. And the way they use him the next night on Raw, it just continues to be like, okay, yeah, you're going to take losses to the champ, but the heel work that you're doing allows us to stay interested, stay invested, and kudos to the team and the producers for allowing a match to kind of keep you intrigued. And it was vicious. I liked it.
So I thought it was a good match, but this is my problem with it. Drew McIntyre ends up retaining his belt, which is fine. I think we both agree he probably should retain his belt. He's doing a fantastic job as the champion. But what you end up doing is you work in these previous legends that Randy Orton has taken out. So it's Big Show. Yeah. It's then Shawn Michaels. And then in the very, very end, I was waiting for Ric Flair to pop out of someplace and slap the figure 4 on. He ends up driving the ambulance away. But you have these big names interfere in this match. And I think it kind of devalues what Drew McIntyre brought to the table in this match, what Drew McIntyre did. Because there were points in this match where you could make the argument Drew McIntyre was on the ropes, literally and figuratively, and Randy Orton had a victory basically within his grasp. But then you have Big Show chokeslam him through a table, and you have Shawn Michaels super kick him off of the top of an ambulance. And it allows Drew McIntyre either a breath, or it allows him enough time to kind of recompose himself to, in the end, get the victory. And again, I don't have a problem with him winning. I think we both thought he should have won. It's the matter, in fact, of how he won this match. And it was the fact that you had other people interfering in this match instead of just letting him go out there and just work Randy Orton over. And Randy Orton does a fantastic job. Like, this match didn't take the shine off of either one of these guys. And you could make the argument conversely that it was because you had guys like Shawn Michaels, you had guys like the Big Show interfere with it, that Randy Orton maybe comes out even a brighter star after all of this. But I just don't need to see these guys interfere in the championship match on the behalf of the babyface. I just don't need to see that, and I don't want to see that. Now, the Universal Championship match. This match has been praised pretty much by everybody. The conversation surrounding this match is that this was Roman Reigns' best match of his career. And I thought it was a very good match. I don't know if I'd go so far to say it was his best match of his career. But Roman Reigns ends up defeating Jey Uso when Jimmy Uso is forced to throw in the towel to save his brother. Now, this was probably one of the most vocal matches I think I've ever heard. You heard these guys talking so much to each other. And it wasn't like they were calling moves out in the ring. It was just there was so much going on. And this was basically a blood feud for these two, which I thought was great. I'm really interested to see how WWE spins this on Friday night with SmackDown. Because what happened during all of this is I'm your tribal leader. I'm the guy that you have to follow. So there's this talk about Roman Reigns doing this whole mafia motif with what he's going to do. So does Roman Reigns now become, in this case, the big dog, the head dog, the tribal leader of both Jay and Jimmy Uso, and they basically have their own clique starting? I'm wondering if this is the direction we're going to go in. I thought this was a fantastic match, though.
Yeah, highlighted by a heavy work rate. I thought that when you hear that fans support Roman Reigns and calling it the best match, well, that's because Uso definitely made him look good. And he definitely, belonged. And that's what we want to see from time to time, is some new wrestlers get some opportunities to get into some big matches. And Uso, despite, some of the struggles with the tag team, they're on again, off again situations, in that match, given the spotlight, he did well and he performed admirably, and I think that he elevated himself. And if they went in that direction, I'd fully support it. The match was great. I thought that what you're trying to do now in this story with Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns is to establish that, hey, I'm the big dog, come and get it, I'm tough, and I'm going to display this new vicious character that's going to come out here and just take it. And look, WWE is in search of that. Maybe in the past they've been reluctant to elevate stars to a higher degree. This could do that for Roman Reigns. If he gets into some good feuds, some really high quality, good storytelling, SmackDown, like we've said in the past, has been the show that has been capturing a lot of people's attention. And with Roman Reigns at the top of it, I see a lot of success and an opportunity, at least, to turn around some bad narratives. And that can't be said for Raw, because Raw continues to just be a mess, and I'm just shocked at how poorly Raw fails to build upon good shows. It is literally so wild that you can skip Raw and you really miss nothing.
No, you're absolutely right. We're going to get into it here in a moment about Raw. We do end up splitting the points. The issue becomes a lot of the women that we had differing opinions on, those matches didn't take place. So we ended up just taking each a half a point. Like I said, I can't get an edge on you to save my life. You now lead 10-5. I'm still 5 points in the hole. That brings us to what we both agree is probably the best show on WWE right now, and that is SmackDown. And I wanted to take this moment to kind of highlight the continued development of Alexa Bliss. So on SmackDown, you end up seeing Alexa Bliss basically going down the crazy train and becoming, I guess, this more possessed character who is owned by the Fiend, which I think is fantastic. And Alexa Bliss, when she was at her peak, she was a bright spot in the women's division. And I think we both agree she can go. She is an excellent wrestler. She is a fantastic mouthpiece. On top of that, she has a look, which is great. Alexa Bliss and her continued development down this path with the Fiend, I think, is an infusion the women's division needs. You bring Nikki Cross up from NXT, and it was a nice pairing between the two. Nikki Cross did a lot of the legwork because Alexa Bliss has dealt with a lot of concussion problems. So you would have Alexa Bliss do most of the talking, Nikki Cross would do most of the selling, and that worked. But Nikki Cross was kind of this weird goth character that it never really seemed like it took. And I think what you get with Alexa Bliss is you get a little bit more of that. You get that more crazed, deranged. It's a bit of a different vibe. And I think she does a great job portraying any character you give her. And I think she sells it. And I think this is a huge bonus for this WWE women's division. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the opportunity for Alexa Bliss to take steps forward has been awesome. I think she's got that, character that, sometimes in WWE and in professional wrestling, you just have that it factor, whatever it may be, whether it be her interview segments, her performances, her reincarnations. You just want to pay attention. You get invested. So I think that this is a star and a character that when she's highlighted, I think it just makes the show better. So I think wherever they may take it, I'm fascinated with it, and I'm enjoying it. And I think that's why SmackDown continues to be part of one of the better wrestling shows, is because there's some characters you can get invested in, and they're seemingly doing the right things with it. And I just think she's got that unique wrestling look, and I think it's really good. So I'm really happy, and I'm impressed with how her career has kind of evolved. She's had her main event runs, she's had her titles, but the times where she's not featured in prominent storylines, she still makes them interesting as well.
No, I agree with you 100%. I don't want to spend too much time on Raw because in my notes I have another shitty Raw.
Yeah,
but
what's the
there
deal?
are a couple things I do want to just kind of throw out there, and we can briefly move through them. Bobby Roode comes back, and I feel like this was just a wasted spot. Bobby Roode ends up coming back and gets defeated by Drew McIntyre. I feel like this is the complete encapsulation of Bobby Roode's WWE run. Great entrance. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but there's zero substance.
Yeah, exactly. Zero substance. That's in essence what I wrote. I'm just like, what? My notes say, what is this? What was the purpose? What was the purpose of Raw? If you could just sum it up in 60 seconds, what was the purpose of that?
Yeah. Aleister Black, to me, he's just another guy. I think creative has ruined him. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're on the same page.
Yeah, they took a character that I liked and made it into a character I don't. I mean, how is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. And then real quick on Mandy Rose, then we can get out of this and we can go right into your Impact review. Mandy Rose on SmackDown was one of the hotter acts going. It was awesome. Her and the whole thing with Otis, it had been great. The whole angle with Sonya Deville had been great. Sonya Deville obviously had to take some time away because she has other things going on in her life with stalkers. But Mandy Rose on SmackDown was fantastic. They move her to Raw. They instantly pair her with Dana Brooke. Dana Brooke is going no place. This instantly cools her off. She had nothing but hot heat on SmackDown, moves to Raw, and now she is ice cold. This is just WWE messing with characters and essentially ruining them. I'd love to get your review on Impact. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like.
Yeah, Impact was a good show, highlighted again by some tag team wrestling. And whenever the Good Brothers make an appearance, then you got to pay attention as to what's going on. And they go up and they further their push towards Bound for Glory, where they're going to take on, obviously, the Motor City Machine Guns for the tag team championships. But in this situation, on Impact, they go up against the Rascals, and I think what the big takeaway is that you basically kind of had a glorified squash match, but that's not how the angle was really kind of set up, and it kind of diminished a little bit what the Rascals were about, and that's not exactly what the intended consequence is when you have some of these matches and when they're put together. You want to have the Good Brothers elevate a tag team. You don't want to kind of squash people and handle business in that way, because everyone understands the Good Brothers are going to be in the title mix, but you don't want to do the Rascals in that way. And it maybe came across as, hey, the setup was that, hey, this could be like a mini, like sometimes I think what happens is that sometimes you only have one night feuds, but you don't want to treat one night feuds as a squash match. You want to treat it like, hey, let the Rascals get some things in, let it be a match that can be a little bit better. And that did not come off because it kind of more appeared like, okay, we're going to highlight the Good Brothers, and the Rascals were just thrown in here to get the Good Brothers to the Motor City Machine Guns. And that's not really what you want to have happen. But all in all, the character development on Impact has done well. Rich Swann and his angle continued to be evolved. Tennille Dashwood has continued to shine, even though she took a loss this week in a rematch to Jordynne Grace. I thought Impact, all in all, was a smooth show. Just a little bit, I would say that the women's tag team doesn't really deliver as much as the men in terms of interest and in-ring work rate. But all in all, I would give the show a solid B, worth your time to check out, and really, really pay attention now to the Good Brothers because they're about to take off, and Bound for Glory is going to be something that's going to be probably a really interesting show. But the good thing is in wrestling, when you have opportunities to kind of tease some things, it's good. And they've run a theme like now, who attacked Eddie Edwards? And it played out all throughout Impact. And it adds intrigue. Any level of intrigue that you can add is really interesting for a show. So Impact was good this week. And I think that they're kind of using what they got to elevate stories. But you just got to make sure to tidy up when you have shorter feuds, not to diminish some characters. I like the Rascals. I think the tag team division, and we've talked about it, at Impact is growing. It's burgeoning. And now that you got the Good Brothers in there to kind of be the class of the division, you could have a feud where both the Machine Guns and the Good Brothers take care of business and really elevate the tag team division. But don't sleep on the Rascals. They got something, and it's just going to be interesting for creative to figure out what niche they can kind of get into that mid card. Yeah,
I think the Rascals are a nice team. And is it safe to say that you should probably spend more time watching Impact than watching Monday Night Raw at this time?
Skip Raw, yeah. Read Raw and watch Impact. Raw is, just think that at a time that there's a lot more questions than answers that they're able to give. So it comes off as a show that's just a mess. And a lot of the angles aren't there where you're like, wow, I got to be into it. So if you miss it, I barely watched it, barely peek into it. Monday Night Football a little bit more dominant in my mind at this point in time with the games. Oh, and no doubt, it was KC versus Baltimore. It really took a back seat. So I DVR'd it and barely saw it because I was at a bar, and no bars really put on wrestling. So it was not a show that was, it's not really good. SmackDown will get your WWE fix, and then you can go right to NXT.
Now, speaking of NXT, I think the big thing to come out of NXT is this brewing fight between Finn Balor and Kyle O'Reilly that will culminate this weekend. And this is something, there's multiple layers here that I want to touch on. Now, something that you and I complain about all the time is that WWE is very trite in how they do their setups for contract signings. And this really wasn't a contract signing. This was more of a discussion moderated by Shawn Michaels. Now, you end up having two wrestlers sitting opposite of each other with the belt in the middle, so very much like a contract signing. But instead of a contract signing, you have them basically heaping each other with praise and telling each other how much they respect each other, but at the same time, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm not sure how you felt about this. This was different, and I kind of liked it because I thought it was a brilliant way to help build Kyle O'Reilly and to kind of show what I want to talk about in a second. But this was a very civil meeting between the two, and I want to know if you prefer this way to build a fight, or do you prefer the normal contract signing where
no.
We're going to sit across from each other and we're going to beat each other up and throw somebody through a table.
This was good, and I exactly, and I think that's what NXT has mastered is that, hey, when older stars leave or they get called up or injuries happen, they elevate new people. And this is a great opportunity. It was new, it was fresh, it was intriguing. That's all you can ask for. So I was all for it.
Now, I like this. Before this, we ended up getting this little vignette of Kyle O'Reilly. And my big takeaway was this is a really good dude. And they are about to turn him to the whitest of baby faces that you've ever seen. Kyle O'Reilly is about to leave Undisputed Era, and he is about to become a white-hot, white-meat babyface. And I don't know if there's any other way I can sell this to you or make you understand what they're doing with this guy. It is a complete about-face from what you get with Undisputed Era. They basically set it up for him to become the ultimate good guy. This guy is basically a notch below Captain America. And I'm not sure if you got the same vibe as I did. And I think when you ended up going into this conversation between him and Finn Balor, it was much of the same. It was painting him with such a brush that he is a good guy. He is not what Undisputed Era was.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited too because I think that even though I might have pigeonholed him as someone that maybe not yet ready, give him the chance. Give him an opportunity to prove people wrong. And I think that with a little bit of a WWE push, then there's an opportunity maybe to create a new star, somebody else to throw in the mix there. And I think it's perfect to have him go up against Finn Balor. I think that Finn Balor can make this guy.
Absolutely. Finn Balor is probably the guy to do it with. Let's transition into AEW. Now, I want to know what your overall thoughts were on this week's episode, because I thought this was a much better episode than last week. I thought it was a very good show. I thought it was very entertaining. I thought if this was a show that you just kind of briefly tuned into just to kind of quickly check out, I thought you would have been impressed with it. All that being said, I don't know if it did a whole lot to really advance any storylines. And I think that was probably my biggest issue, maybe my biggest takeaway from this was really good show. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a solid 8, maybe higher. But what was the big thing I took away from here? In watching the show, when I watch these shows, I'm usually watching, I'm like, okay, cool. What is there to talk about? What can I steal from this for John and I to be able to discuss for at least 5 or 10 minutes in a segment? And I'll be honest with you, I was left kind of searching, and I didn't really feel like I took a whole ton away. There was like one thing that really made me say, okay, there's something here for us to discuss. And I'm wondering if you kind of had the same takeaway as I did.
Yeah, it was a wrestling show. I think maybe in the way in which AEW has been, they've kind of advanced storylines with each show. And sometimes you just get a wrestling show. And Cody addressed Brody Lee. I thought that was done well. I'm kind of liking what FTR does. I think that SCU was a nice opportunity for them to get into a match. So exactly, while you're not feeling like the sizzle, I think sometimes the way you kind of look at it in a sports analogy is like you have a highly aggressive football team that throws it deep. Well, sometimes the wide receivers are tired, and then sometimes you just got to throw in a simple run up the middle that takes 40 seconds so that the lineman can relax. And I think that in this show, with how the heat has been with Jon Moxley and everybody going down, and you got Orange Cassidy, you got Darby Allin, Moxley, and I think that kind of it was like a good show, but one that wasn't like prime and ready to roll. I thought the intrigue with the Eddie Kingston scenario was really good. I thought that was really a great thing to do, where to set the scene, Eddie Kingston got a contract that said, hey, he can pick anybody of his choice to face off against Jon Moxley, and it turned out to be the Butcher. And I thought it was a good match. I thought it was decent. Moxley obviously gets the win, but I thought that the match had an opportunity to kind of elevate the story where Kingston kind of works his way back in, and it'll be a nice opportunity for that. So to put Kingston in a main event situation, I think is what people want to see. So Orange Cassidy versus 10 was a funny match. Good to go, entertaining. Cassidy gets the W, but I think where you may see it lacking is there was no real impactful moments where you go, okay, if you missed it, did you really miss something? And I think you and I kind of are in that camp where you want to have like at least a moment where people are like, oh, you missed that? This one didn't do that. But it was like just a simple, basic, good wrestling show. I rated it a little bit lower. I rated it a 7.
I thought, it was weird. And here's the thing. You can give Eddie Kingston a mic all week long, and I'm just going to sit there and listen. He is fantastic on the microphone. I think he is a guy who has really mastered telling a story through words, and I think he does a great job every time he's out there. Now, the one thing I did take away from this, and it was more of a question that kind of got me to thinking. So we're going to have an 8-man battle royal for the number one contender for Jon Moxley's title. And this was set up more to drive a deeper wedge between Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. And Kenny Omega was announced for this match. Hangman Page obviously upset as he leaves the announcing booth when it's dropped that Kenny Omega is going to be competing for this. Isn't it time for Kenny Omega to be a top guy in AEW? I feel like since AEW's come around, Kenny Omega has done a great job of just kind of fading to the back and just kind of being in the back and really helping to support anything that really needs support. Now, this was a guy who 2 years ago, 3 years ago even, was the hottest name in all of wrestling, doing some of the greatest wrestling matches that I think both of us have ever seen when he was working in New Japan. Goes to AEW, and I don't want to say he's been cooled off because he's still here and he's still very top of mind, but you're not getting that same type of performance. And whether it's because he's not delivering the same type of performance or whether it's he's just there more supporting other guys, really trying to help build this brand, I think I could make the argument, actually I know I could make the argument that AEW would be in a much better place if Kenny Omega was a top guy giving you 6 and 7 star matches, not every week, but every pay-per-view. I think this is the time for a Kenny Omega, Jon Moxley, New Japan type of match.
Absolutely. Why not? I think that you and I have said it. It'll be fresh. It'll be new. And I think that what everybody's seeing is that you're not using Kenny Omega to the fullest capacity, especially in his prime. Let's go. Take the reins off. Let's see some interesting creative work, and let's get Kenny Omega into some nice feuds. So that's what you got to do. You have to do it because otherwise you're wasting a guy that's in his prime, and he shouldn't be in tag team matches. He shouldn't be with Hangman Page. Let's move this along, and let's get to business, and let's make some money, and let's make some memories.
And it's nothing against Hangman Page. It's just
he's better. Omega's a main event guy.
Yeah, this guy is a monster star. Hangman Page is going to get there, and I think everybody else can get there as well. But I think if Kenny Omega is eating at the table, everybody gets the feast because all eyes are now on AEW.
All right, cuz, what caught your attention? Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes.
So Universal Champion Roman Reigns had some unflattering things to say about CM Punk when asked Tuesday about potentially having a match with the former WWE superstar. During an appearance on Complex Load Management's podcast, Reigns didn't pull any punches, saying, "I don't like the guy. I don't know many people who do, but I'm willing to put business first and make really good content if that's the case." Not really sure what the main issue is here yet. Hopefully next week I will have a little bit more information for you, but it does not seem like Roman Reigns really cares for CM Punk. This could just be Roman towing the company line because, again, WWE, CM Punk, a little bit of a strained relationship there. During an interview with the Dropkick podcast, RVD discussed possibly getting inducted and revealed who he'd want to introduce him in WWE's Hall of Fame. I think the obvious answer is probably Paul Heyman, and I think that's definitely the right person. I can definitely see it happening, but knowing how things work, I could also see it not happening or not happening for a long time anyways. I used to think, and I still am not sure, but do you have to retire in order to be in the Hall of Fame? And the fact that I've been wrestling for Impact, that's got to be a factor too. They don't want to do too much with somebody, but who knows? Of course, it'd be an honor, and we'll see. Now, RVD last performed in WWE in 2014, and according to PW Insider, RVD and Katie Forbes have both left Impact. So it sounds like last week's performance was probably their last. Now, reports also state that Rob Van Dam has been working without an official contract for some time, and they've been working on a series of short-term agreements. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens moving forward. Now, while speaking to Pro Wrestling Junkies podcast, this is obviously a news and notes segment that is just littered with podcast information, just like us. Former WWE star Zack Ryder, now Matt Cardona in AEW, revealed that his All Elite Wrestling deal actually expired after All Out earlier this month. He said, "That's the place to be right now. To be there even for a month and to do a couple of matches was a lot of fun. It was great just to be out there and be myself again. Hopefully we get to do it again soon." Cardona only debuted for AEW back on June 23rd's episode of Dynamite, saving his real-life good friend Cody Rhodes from an attack at the hands of the Dark Order. He then teamed with Cody the following week. So it'll be interesting to see if they get a long-term deal done for Matt Cardona. And that's it for this week's wrestling news and notes, my friend.
Make sure to follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you are a fan of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast, Doc and Jock, The Throwback, any of the other shows on the network, make sure you go to the favorite place that you listen and download podcasts. Type in these three words, Detroit Sports Podcast. When you hit that subscribe button, our content will find you daily. And if you have time, please feel free to leave a 5-star review. That's how we keep growing this thing, and we appreciate everybody that's interacted with us since 2013. I look forward to the next week of Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast, where we break down all the happenings in the world of professional wrestling. Ooh, what a rush. Yes, I love doing this podcast. Love breaking down wrestling with you, cuz. Let's talk next week.
Sounds good, man. Can you get Ultimate Warrior booger snot hanging out of your nose as well?
Yeah, woo, baby. I'm not like Ric Flair this week, laying out on the floor, baby. I'm the one doing the attacking. I'm the one busting through and handling business, taking down all the marks, baby.
So you're saying you are the man?
I am the man, baby. I am the Randy Orton. I am the Triple H. I'm the Vince McMahon, all rolled up into one, baby.
Nice.
Let's talk
I look
soon.
forward to next week, guys.
Yes, sir.